next speaker is a very versatile person with diverse interests and experience. He is a former executive at the Danish Ministry of Taxation and after at the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Currently, he is Director for Analysis of the Danish Center for Political Studies. A member of the Mont Pelerin Society, he is Otto Bruns Petersen.
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here, and let me tell you why. I was born the year the Berlin Wall was erected. I don't remember it being erected, though, but I remember, of course, growing up with the fact that we had the Berlin Wall, and not only the Berlin Wall, but we had the Iron Curtain dividing Europe and keeping almost half of the population inside. So it was the Berlin Wall was always a symbol of the importance of liberty to me and to others of my generation. So it was a sort of an inspiration. And when it came down, and this happened very rapidly, we didn't expect that this was going to happen so quickly. And not only the Berlin Wall came down, but the Iron Curtain came down, at least for most of Eastern Europe, Bulgaria included. So I guess that most of you don't remember the Berlin Wall coming down, for the simple fact that many of you weren't born at the time of the Berlin Wall coming down. But to me, that's very exciting that and I have met at this conference a lot of very energetic young people who are very enthusiastic about the importance of liberty. I think that's really a great thing, and that even now, even if we don't have these very have symbols like that, there's a lot of young people in Europe and in your countries who really understands the importance of liberty. And I think that's really great. But going back to the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall, at that time there were some intellectuals who were trying to convince the liberated people of the East that there was an alternative to capitalism. They didn't have to adopt capitalism. They could just look at Scandinavia and they would see sort of a different model, a gentler kind of socialism that they could adopt. Luckily, the idea really didn't catch on. And I think the Czech, the later president of the Czech Republic, Václav Klaus, famously said, "The third way between socialism and capitalism is the way to the third world." And I think he was right about that. But lately, when I go around in the world, I more and more often come across people who are somehow seeing Denmark, not only Denmark, Scandinavia, but nowadays it's Denmark, especially as sort of a socialist model, or at least an interventionist model for the world. If you adopt the policies of Denmark, then you will become a very happy and a very rich country. It even popped up in the debates between the two democratic contenders to become president of the United States. Apparently, it turned into some a kind of competition who were most Danish in their approach. Well, before you introduce a huge welfare state, I think we should have a closer look at the Danish model. And I should warn you from the outset that don't try this at home. If you don't understand what Scandinavia is about, then you might start something dangerous. What I'm going to look at is basically three questions. How socialists are the Scandinavian countries and Denmark really? And first question. The second question is, we are a rich country, but when did we become rich? And why? And third, what can you learn from the Danish case? Well, it is true that we have very high welfare spendings. And to finance these welfare spendings, we have a high level of taxation. It used to be Sweden that had the highest tax pressure measured as tax revenue to GDP in the world. Unfortunately, they have reformed somewhat, and now they have left the first place to Denmark. So Denmark is a country with very high taxes because we have very high spending. But the other Scandinavian countries, as you might gather from this graph, also have quite high taxes. This is Sweden. This is Norway. They have high taxes even if they have a lot of oil. Then you have Iceland is there, and we have Finland there. So they are all higher than the sort of OECD average. If you have very high taxes, it means that you can't be a capitalist economy, right? Well, not really. Actually, if you look at the ranking of Denmark and the other Scandinavian countries on various indices on the degree of economic freedom, something strange happens. The fact is that the Scandinavian countries, they are quite high on these indices. Sometimes not at present, but often Denmark is rated as a more free economy than, for instance, the United States. Some of you might be familiar with the Fraser Institute and other think tanks. They produce an index called the Economic Freedom of the World Index, which I'm going to look mostly at today. I prefer that, but it's a matter of taste. The Heritage Foundation also produces an index which places Denmark at number 11. And by the way, this is not measuring economic flow, but it's measuring the degree of what the Cato Institute called human freedoms. They just produced a new index, and actually Denmark is number 1 on that index. So we are a relatively free market economy, even if we have high taxes. How can that be? Actually, if you look at the composition of index, it might become a little bit. Something has happened here. That's not. I'll take you to the numbers. Something has happened to the table. But if you look at the overall score, you see that the Danish score is we are on the 22nd place of the ranking of the countries of the world. If you look at this, the component called size of government, this is where we have taxes and spending, then we are almost at the bottom of the list with number 154. So this is the one element on which the Scandinavian countries aren't that free market economy. But if you look at the other components of the index, Denmark is doing relatively well. And the other components are, first, the legal system and the protection of property rights. There's a high level of protection. We are number 8 on that in the world. Sound money. The maximum score is 10, and we are at 9.8, at number 7 in the world. Freedom to trade internationally. Of course, that freedom to trade more and more becomes a matter of EU regulations. But it is also true that the Scandinavian countries, being relatively small, have had a tradition for open trade. Because mercantilism or protectionism was rather expensive if you can't produce everything yourself. So there has been a tradition to be very dependent on foreign trade and thus having a relatively free trade. Also, if you look at the level of regulation, you'll see that the Scandinavian countries are relatively free compared to a lot of countries. Of course, running a tax system like the tax system we have requires a lot of legislation and a lot of bureaucrats to run it. But otherwise, it is relatively there's a tradition for not regulating that much in Scandinavian countries. So overall, Denmark and the rest of the Scandinavian countries are relatively free market. And let me take you through some of the examples of that. First, Denmark hasn't had a wave of privatizations like many other countries have. And one reason is that we don't have that many state-owned state-owned enterprises to begin with. So even if we have a large public sector, the government doesn't own or control that much of the private sector. We have a very flexible labor market. In Denmark, it's one of the few countries in the world which doesn't have a minimum wage law. So if you can contract on any wage you like between employers and employees. We have a high degree of freedom to hire and fire, meaning that if you employ somebody, it's a matter of contract. It's not a matter of regulations. What you couldn't see because the table before didn't quite work was that, especially if you look at our credit markets, they are quite liberal. Our financial markets have been quite liberal. And that tradition has really kept on into the financial crisis. So Denmark is one of the few countries where the taxpayers didn't rescue the banks. Actually, the government put up an insurance scheme, and the banks had to pay to come in, and if they came in trouble, they had to use that insurance scheme. And there was a surplus. So actually, the taxpayers of Denmark didn't pay the banks rather end up paying the taxpayers. And we allowed a number, not large banks, but a number of banks in Denmark were allowed to fail during the financial crisis, where they weren't in most countries. We had, as I mentioned, a strong tradition for free trade. It's relatively easy to set up a company in Denmark. Actually, there was this list or rating system of doing business. And at one time, there was, Denmark came into, had some problems with the rating on that list, because you had to, there was one of the elements they were rating after was how long time does it take to get a permit to start a new company? And they couldn't get an answer. Not a satisfactory answer. And they kept asking, how many days does it take to get that permit? And the answer was, there are no days, because you don't need a permit. If you want to set up a company, you can just go on the internet and you can register the company. When you look at our generous welfare system, one of the first elements was a universal pension scheme, which applies to everybody, even if they hadn't been in the labor market. Of course, running such a pension scheme becomes more and more expensive and more burdenful, and the Danish government ran into trouble because of that. And what has happened has really been a reprivatization of the pension scheme. Not in the sense that we have universal old age pensions still, but it's becoming less and less important relative to a private scheme where people who, when they are in the labor market, then they save for their old age pension. So we have actually had, and it was only an experience with this heavy government pension scheme. Nowadays we have it's becoming more and more private, so you can say it's been privatized. And of course we've had Denmark has had, because of the pressure from the huge welfare spending, governments for almost 30 years have been reforming public finances. So nowadays Denmark has what is called sustainable public finances, meaning that if you keep the system running, the government won't go bankrupt at some time. So one of the few countries in the world, another country which has sustainable public finances, is just the Swedes. So, but just to take you to the situation in the other Nordic countries, their experiences are, of course, in the details, somewhat different, but the overall picture is the same. Finland is currently tops the economic freedom of the world index from the Nordic countries, being number 19. Denmark is number 22, Norway 27, Sweden lagging a little bit at 42, and then we have the Icelandics, who proudly used to be very high on the list, but now, as Hannes explained earlier, has dropped, unfortunately, somewhat on the list. So that's a rather sad fate. I think some of the Icelanders used to be Norwegians who didn't like to pay taxes, so they fled to Iceland, but they got into a bit of trouble, but still the overall picture is the same. What is interesting is that we did a little experiment a few years ago, trying to say, what if we take the most liberal part, if we go through the index on the economic liberty, and we take you construct a country by taking the Nordic country which is most liberal on each component. Where would you end up? Actually, if you took the most liberal part of each of the 5 countries' rankings, you would end up with the freest country in the world. So this is just to say that yes, we have very high taxes, and we have a huge welfare state spendings, and a lot of challenges from that. But it's important to understand that this is welfare state spending is not the reason why we're doing so relatively well. We have a relatively free economy, and now I'll turn to the next question, which is, if Denmark is rich, or the rest of Scandinavia is rich, when did it become rich? Actually, that happened, it's not recent. I've tried to plot as long back as I can get. These are Danish GDP per capita relative to other countries. The blue line is 12 Western countries, you could call them old Europe, France, Germany, United Kingdom, and so on. So that's the blue line. And the yellow line, that is what is called Western offshoots. And Western offshoots, they are America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. And the red line is the United States. As you can see, they follow they're almost identical for our purpose. You can just treat them as identical. And interestingly enough, if you go back to the 19th century, Denmark used to be relatively poor. So we had a GDP per capita which was lower than than old Europe was at that time. We were still poorer than the United States, almost 80% of the wealth of the United States. So what happened was that and if you sort of ignore that noise from the World War and the Great Depression, what you'll see is that Denmark really tops the relative wealth we catch up with the rest of Europe. We overtake them, and then it sort of levels out in the 50s, in 1950s. And then there you see a decline, which of course might not be problematic because we are richer, and then there will be some catching up from the rest of the rest of Europe. But now try to look at the development relative to the United States, and the interesting point is first that it also reaches a top a little bit later, but still in the 1960s, early 1970s. And there's a little bit of catching up. Of course, we're still poorer than, or still have lower wealth than the United States, but now it's starting to decline. And that's really a problem. I mean, that we can't keep pace with a richer country. It's not strange that you can keep pace with a poorer country, which is catching up to you. But that you can catch up to a richer country is a greater problem. And that sort of illustrates a key point about the Danish experience. That is that we have, since the 1970s, have relatively low productivity growth, especially relative to the United States. So, but it's true, Denmark is a rich country, but we became rich very early. And now try to look at our tax burden. It's true that Denmark has very high taxes, as you can see here. But we didn't always have that. In fact, Denmark used to be, we didn't have a welfare state. The Vikings didn't have a welfare state. And so we haven't had that for hundreds of years. It's a relatively new phenomenon. Until the 1960s, when we really had the creation of the welfare state, was this jump here, and then this jump here is where the welfare state was created. But before that, we used to be a low-tax country. And now I just, for simplicity, just took the United States and compared to Denmark. If you took, for instance, and compared to Great Britain, We were substantially lower taxes historically. So Denmark used to be a low tax country at the time when we became rich. So you have to understand the order of things. We didn't become rich because we built a welfare state. It's rather the other way around. We became rich and then decided to use some of that wealth to decide to redistribute some of that wealth. And of course, when you decide to redistribute wealth and do that with high taxes, it has a cost, meaning that your relative performance is not that good. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why it's very dangerous to believe that you could become rich by creating a welfare state. A welfare state is a burden, and if you try to implement a welfare state at a time when you aren't very wealthy, then you are beginning to lag behind at a very early time. So that's why it's dangerous and why you shouldn't try it at home. Let me just mention a few of the challenges that I see for the welfare state of Denmark. One problem is that when you have a high level of government consumption, it's very difficult to create values for the citizen. And why is that? Well, that's because when you are handing out free goods, so to speak, you don't use the price system. You are not able to give people a basket of goods that they would buy. You are handing out sort of a rationed basket of goods that the government decides. So you need a mechanism for deciding what should be in that basket when you don't use the market. And that's a problem that we face. We have a big government sector, and you have large level of government consumption, which is provided so-called free of charge to people. Then you can't use the allocation mechanism of the price system. So that means that it's difficult to use the price mechanism to promote efficiency, and especially as some goods become more and more complicated, this problem becomes bigger and bigger. Take healthcare, for instance. When we introduced free healthcare in Denmark, there weren't that many treatments you really could give to people. I mean, if they got sick, you could take them to hospital, you could put them in a bed, and you can hope that they would either get well by themselves or that they would die. That was sort of the treatment we had for most illnesses. Now there's almost no limit to how many meaningful treatments you can give to people. But if you can't ration with the price system, you have to make an arbitrary rationing mechanism. And if people are very different and have different needs, it means that for instance, healthcare becomes more and more complex, the government becomes less and less able to handle it. So that becomes an increasing problem. You have a little bit about it the same in education. The problem with a generous welfare system is that you attract people to welfare benefits, and that you have seen, especially in Denmark, that the welfare schemes which were set up sometimes as temporary means to help people at time with high unemployment, they became permanent. And so that has had the result that nowadays, more or less half of the adult population is on one or another kind of welfare benefit. Of course, it creates huge pressures on government spending, and that means you need to have very high taxes. The problem with high taxes is that high taxes, they tend to be very distorting. So the higher taxes you have, the more distorting they are, and it doesn't. They increase more than proportionally. So there's high pressure on the tax system. Actually, in Denmark, I think this is true for the other Scandinavian too, given the fact that we have to raise so much money, our tax system tend to be relatively efficient. For instance, we don't have as many exemptions to the VAT system as many other countries have. And that's for the sheer reason that when you need to raise that much money, you have to have a relatively efficient tax system. But you, at some point, reaches the limit of how much it can take, and that's where we are, and that's why the tax reform has been on the agenda in all Scandinavian countries for a long time, and still are. So there's a problem with distorting taxes. As I mentioned, the record of productivity in Denmark has been really disappointing, and this goes back a long time. It's a problem, especially in the public sector, of course, because it's very difficult to have innovations, to have creative destruction in the public sector. Actually, if you look at it, over a span of 10 years or something like that, more than half of the productivity in the private sector comes from businesses going out of business and new businesses coming in. So it's less than half that comes from new inventions and so on from within businesses. So this hard mechanism of evolution, which comes from competition, is a very important driver of productivity in the private sector. You don't have that in the public sector. So, and that produces a strain on productivity. Denmark is an aging country, and so are most countries in Europe. Actually, our aging problem is not as bad as it is in most other countries, and nothing like in Japan, where they tend to be, there are almost only old people back left in Japan nowadays. But the fact that we are aging is creating new pressures, and that has meant that a lot of welfare spending has had to be reformed, and have been reformed in all the Scandinavian countries. So some of the highly high regarded welfare state spendings have actually been rolled back in recent years, due to the pressures from the aging problem. As I mentioned, especially Denmark used to have very liberal regulation of financial markets. It meant that we were less severely hit by the financial crisis than other countries. Those regulations are increasingly coming from the EU, and so that's a worry that that some of the elements of our relatively free market system might not last for that long, because we will have to introduce new regulations. I just quickly talk about this question of happiness or life satisfaction, which is sort of the reason why many have taken an interest in Denmark. We were sort of the happiest country in the world. We aren't anymore. Now it's the Swiss. The Swiss are the most happy. So if you want a model, if you want to create a perfect model, you just go and look at the Swiss. The interesting thing is that there has been for a long time in the study of the so-called happiness studies in economics, there's been an idea that there really was no clear relationship between wealth and happiness. And actually, the recent research, if you look at it, that tends not to be true. There is a relationship, and it's not strange that if you have economic prosperity, then people tend to be more happy. I just took this graph from Angus Deaton, whom you might know. He won the Nobel Prize in economics this week, and has also looked into this. And this is his reading of. It's not fresh data, but as you can see, there's a relatively clear relationship that as income rises, the reported happiness increases. So the idea that you can somehow substitute wealth for something else and become happy, and that the Scandinavian model is pointing away to that, is not true either. There is a relatively well-established relationship between happiness and wealth, so there's no way around that. So the conclusions, and then we can go into some the questions, but I think it's important to understand that Denmark became a rich country before we established the welfare state. So we became rich in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That's where and that was a time where we were a low tax country. We had low taxes. Taxes at the level of the United States. There's no getting around that high taxes and redistribution has a negative effect on wealth. But so do other limitations on economic freedom. And to some extent, you can have high taxes if you have a liberal regime in other dimensions. And that's sort of the explanation for what has happened in Scandinavia. We have high taxes, but at the same time, we have relatively free market economics in other dimensions. That's very important. So, apart from our high taxes and spending, we are relatively free market economy, and our wealth correspond to that level of economic freedom, and that's also what's responsible for our level of life satisfaction. So, so much for the Scandinavian model. As I said, you're welcome to try it at home, but if you apply the lesson correctly, and the lesson is that there is no way between capitalism and socialism, which is pointing to sort of a Scandinavian paradise. Don't try that at home.
We have 15 good minutes for questions, and there is the first question, please, here in the front.
First, thanks for the interesting presentation. The leftists often argue that the political discourse of the right focuses too much on cost rather than value. And they argue, of course, that the welfare system offers value to citizens that cannot be offered through free enterprise. And of course, outside of Scandinavia, as you pointed out, the Scandinavian model, which is not very well understood, is represented as a good example of socialist policies in a capitalist economy. And it's interesting that you mention, considering the demographic pressures that are arising in Europe and obviously in Denmark as well. I recently heard about a campaign, Do It for Denmark. But anyway, my point is this. The political discourse has been unable to escape from the model that was established by the leftists regarding the cost-value dichotomy. Is there a change there? And how the changes that need to be done, obviously, in order not to allow Denmark to collapse in like probably 20, 30 years, the changes in the taxation system and obviously increasing further the economic freedom of the citizens, how are they being argued for in relation to the cost value dichotomy?
Okay, I think you have already 3 questions.
Okay. I think it's 1 question.
I think there were 3, but let guest respond to them.
Well, the fact is, as I mentioned, that there has been economic reforms going on in the Scandinavian or the Nordic countries for more than 30 years, and which has been brought about the huge pressures from our high taxes and from our generous welfare spendings. So that there are a lot of inconsistencies, and they have been on the forefront of the agenda for all that time. Governments of all colors have tried to handle it. And what have they tried to do? Well, basically, when you have a high level of welfare benefits, what you need to do is to prevent people from swarming in, you need to regulate it to a high degree. So what happens nowadays when people become unemployed, you have to, they have to do a lot to obtain the welfare benefit. So it's becoming difficult. It's called active labor market policies, but really a lot of it is, what you're really doing is trying to tax them, not in sense of, in the economic sense, or in monetary sense, but you're taxing them in the sense that if you become unemployed and apply for unemployment benefits, if you don't get a job quite quickly, you will put a heavy tax on your time. So you have to go through a retraining program, you have to do all kinds of activities in order to get that. That's sort of one way we have seen this reform, because you have to have a limit to how much people can obtain. So I think it's important to realize that these reforms have been going on for a very long time, and also that there has been serious crises in the Scandinavian countries, or the Nordic, Finland too. We have had severe economic crises. Denmark had it in the 70s and 80s. Sweden, Finland had it in the 90s, of course. Iceland is going through a severe crisis on its own now. But this is not so that we haven't had economic crises. But some of these crises have been sort of pushing the politicians to reform.
Good. Some other questions? Here in the middle.
Is there one single assumption that you could make, and probably this assumption would make the system work? Or maybe state it in a different way. What's the main reason that, is it human weakness? Because some presume that, for example, communist or socialist systems fail because of human weaknesses, because it's a great idea, but you can't really put it in practice. So is there something that you would assume, if it would exist and somehow be made to work, that this system could really continue to exist and function properly?
I think if there's one thing we have learned is that incentives matter. And if you create economic incentives for something, sooner or later, that which you create incentives for is going to happen. So you have to focus very much on the incentives you are creating. And of course, a lot of it doesn't have to happen in the short run. I mean, a lot of the welfare state arrangements, in the beginning they didn't cost very much, because it was considered a little bit embarrassing to apply for social benefits, even if they were very, very generous. You wouldn't want to be the first to do it. So in the beginning, people they didn't do it, and they tried to manage on their own. But of course, as it becomes more and more normal for other people to apply for social benefits, you're going to do it too. And then taxes have to go up, and then people say, well, I'm paying so much in taxes, I have to get some of my money back. And so you get a dynamic in the long run. And the danger might be that if you don't have it in the short run, politicians might be tempted to create welfare schemes that will become extremely expensive in the long run. And I think this is very much the Danish or Nordic experience. And then another lecture, interesting lecture from the Danish model is you have to be very careful about making tax policy which creates a lot of revenue for the politicians. Actually, this is part of the Danish story. As you can see from the huge jump in the welfare state spending in Denmark came from the mid-60s to the early 70s. And it was two governments. One was a left-wing coalition, and then you have a right-wing coalition. So almost all the parties in the Danish government, they can claim responsibility for that jump. And it really started out with, on the one hand, welfare expenditure schemes that weren't that expensive in the short run, and then a number of tax reforms which really created a lot of revenue in the short run. We had the VAT system in place. We had other tax reforms which really created a lot of money for the Danish government in the short run. And then spending quickly jumped. So that's an interesting part of the Danish story.
Good. The lady in pink has a question. Please stand up so our guests can see you. Is it pink?
My question was exactly connected to this spike when a welfare state was introduced. My impression is, as I listen to you and other people, other Danish people, that they're quite, they agree with the policies of the state. They are not so much against the high taxes. It's not, there is no turmoil in Denmark. Everybody doesn't stand against this policy. So that's why I'm interested in the factors which contributed to this decision, to this introduction of the welfare state. And I'm also interested, did it happen by consensus? Was there some kind of consensus? Was there some kind of particular issue that raised these kind of policies? Or was it a highly disputed decision?
Well, a lot of interesting questions. No, it wasn't. It wasn't like one day the Danish Parliament just woke up one morning and said, "Let's create a huge welfare state." It wasn't like that. Actually, it was a number of schemes being put up, which together became the welfare state. But it wasn't like it was a major decision taken on the welfare state. As I said, at the time, all political parties had a hand in it. But there was, before that, was a huge discussion about whether we should have what should happen to our pension system. And the right, they sort of changed their mind on the issue. They're going from being against state pensions to saying, okay, if we're going to have a state pension, everybody should have a state pension. So that they changed their mind, and that was part of what happened here. What happened next was when you came to the early 1970s, taxes rose dramatically, and spending came along too, and there was a lot of pressure on government finances. We had an enormous tax revolt in Denmark. A tax revolt. So one of the earliest tax revolts came in Denmark as a result of this. There was a new party which was created a short time before the general election, which became the second biggest party in Denmark, and it had on its agenda tax revolt. Actually, they wanted to abolish the income tax completely. So it didn't. It caused political turmoils, but unfortunately, there hasn't really been. The right hasn't have had the strength really to cut spending and taxes. They've tried a number of times, but they haven't had the sort of the strength to manage to do it. So I think that's the brief story about it. But it's interesting to understand that this sort of happens. A lot of it happened by chance. It wasn't sort of a creation or a grand scheme that everybody agreed upon. And it was a very short time. Most of it happened, and a lot of the tax increases later on were due to policies implemented here.
Good. What's the rate of tax avoidance?
It's difficult to know, but as I said, we have a rather efficient tax system, and that's one of the reasons why taxes are so high. Because one of the limits to how high taxes you can have is the degree of tax avoidance, and one of the grand features of the Danish tax system is that it is, to a large extent, third-party based, which means we have sort of privatized our tax system in the sense that who collects the taxes? Well, the income taxes are collected by the employers. So it's difficult. It's difficult to avoid taxes on income taxes. Are difficult to avoid, and then of course we have high indirect taxes, and they are collected by shops and so on. So the fact that we have a huge third-party element is limiting the tax avoidance.
Very last question, please stand up.
Taking into consideration all of the graphs that you presented, it's not that hard to conclude that actually the welfare state is making Danish people a lot less wealthy than they were in the past. So it is not a conspiracy theory, but it's pure, let's say, rational thinking to conclude that if this trend continues, actually the Danish people would become even more and more poorer than in the past. So my question is, what is the public attitude towards this trend in Denmark, and what is the attitude of younger people mostly towards this? Are they accepting this? Because I don't
understood your question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that we have slow productivity growth in Denmark, and we are in a relative decline. What I did here, I don't know if you noticed, but the graph runs all the way to 2030. It's not because I have a time machine that I can give you those numbers. I have taken them from the OECD. So there are OECD predictions for the Danish economy, and what you can see is a rather market decline. And the decline is due to some extent to low productivity growth. But it hasn't really, I think the problem is we've been stagnant for a while, but this is going to, if these predictions are correct, it's going to accelerate. And that's creeping into the public mind at the moment. But it's a gradual process, so we don't have this. There's not a strong political awareness about it right now, but it's an increasing awareness and an increasing concern.
Applause for Mr. Bruns Petersen. Now, at Students for Liberty, we have a tradition that before the very last lecture, we go outside and take a group picture. So please come with me.